before talking about the shades inside the palette, I quickly wanted to talk about the packaging of these palettes and verbally compare them to the packaging of Clionadh's other two palettes. So in terms of packaging, it is pretty consistent. You have the name of the palette in the front and more or less the same kind of information as these palettes had on the back. And frankly, the core difference between these three new palettes and the other palettes that Clionadh has, particularly that I now have the Dragon Fruits cardboard version, is that these palettes have rectangular pan multichromes, whereas these have just circular multichromes. The packaging looks very nicely done and well made. I have seen a lot of third-party brands have printing problems or not have a glossy finish. We don't see that at all with any of these. It's very, very high quality. The first palette I quickly want to talk about is Paleo. So I looked up the word paleo, and obviously the first things that come up is the paleo diet. So I ended up just comparing paleontology and archaeology. Paleontology and archaeology both are studies of the past, but paleontology mostly focuses on plants and animals and remains, whereas archaeology mostly focuses on artifacts, so things that were created by people in the past. Because of that, I was kind of expecting the colors in the Paleo palette to include things that would remind me of animals more. Like, for example, dinosaurs. I was expecting to see some green colors here, dinosaur skin colors and things like that. Now, you could argue that some dinosaurs might have been a little blue or a little bit brownish red. Fine. Of course, plants of the past, I'm guessing, were mostly green. Now, I know that Clionadh was limited because these were recreations of palettes they have brought up from 2017, 2018. And although some shades have changed in these palettes and they've made more multichromy, and from some of you all who have had those old palettes, I've heard that those old palettes did not have very good quality. Whereas I'm seriously hoping that these one would, and we're going to dig and see. So I think they were kind of limited on what they could do. They couldn't all of a sudden completely revamp the palette and make half of it green. And even the outside packaging, I feel like the outside packaging is really mimicking what's inside, but doesn't really remind me of animals of the past or plants of the past, or even like fossils and whatnot. Now talking about the Archeo palette and Beauties, I have not touched any of these, and I've done a reel of these on Instagram, which should be live, showing the unboxing and a close-up of these palettes. If you're curious, you can check it out there. This palette has more variety of color compared to the other palette, but I feel like if you're putting the three palettes together, you're seeing a little bit too much of neutral colors. You can already see there are quite a few neutral colors in this palette, and also quite a few blues. And although just look-wise, because I haven't swatched any of these, it does not look like there are any dupes, I still felt like from a hand's length, some colors could look the same on your eyes. Now, we do have some greens over here, but still I was expecting a bit more of greens. However, I feel that this palette represents Archeo and artifacts produced in the past more closely with these shades than I thought Paleo represented paleontology and studying past animals and plants and whatnot. And then our new palette is Oceano palette, which frankly among the three of these is my favorite color story, particularly also because it doesn't have pretty much any neutral color. And of course, Oceano in Spanish even means ocean, which then kind of insinuates that you're gonna see colors of fish, colors of sea creatures, and wildlife. And this palette definitely represents that. So among the three, I think this one resonates with me more, but I'm very excited for trying all of them. And I'm so happy that I have all three. Now, if you look at a palette like this and you're unsure what kind of color stories you can make on your eyes with this, you can just follow the basics, the basic three color schemes that we've talked about. I'm going to put the video where I talk about the color schemes on the screen. You can review that before continuing watching this video. So our first color scheme is monotone, and we have quite a few neutral shades here and quite a few blues. So you could either choose to make a very bluey palette or a very neutrally palette. And frankly, although I call it monotone, a lot of these blues might go between teals and possibly a little bit of purple, so they might not exactly be a monotone and actually be an analogous scheme, which then brings me to my second point, which is that you can also make analogous color schemes with this palette, definitely with the blues, and then similarly also with the neutral shades. The very obvious complement that I see in this palette is the contrast between the yellow and the blue. I also do see some purple here with this color Ice Core, which could be a complement to this very deep yellow, and you can look for more complements in the shifts of some of these multichromy, duochromy shades. For example, another one could be the contrast between this green. I don't know if you can see the green, but there's a green shift here, and some of these brownish reds. Because there are more color variation in this palette, you obviously have more options. Obviously, you can continue with the monotones. You have quite a few yellows and golds. I mean, this is a gold. Arguably, you can consider it an orange and use it with that color, or you can use it with the yellows. This yellow has a shift of green, which can be used either with this green. I don't know if you can see the green shift there, or with that green. We have a blue, and I think maybe you all see the tealy shift there that can be used with this blue. Also for another variation of monotone, and quite a few of these mauves and more orangey colors that could be used together. And the combinations that I mentioned can be a little bit expanded to make them analogous instead of just monotone. For example, you can use the yellows with the greens, the magenta with the mauve, with the orange, with this lighter mauve, and this color, or even with the yellows. You can use the oranges with the yellow, or even the greens with the blues. And then because of the color variation, there are even more complements obvious in this palette. The first thing that stands out is the contrast between the magenta and these yellows. Or you can consider this mauve. Mauve is a variation of pink, which is a variation of purple, which would also be complementary to the yellows or even to this gold. We have the brick orange with the blues. If you consider the brick orange more reddish, which it kind of is red, you could use it to complement the greens. Now, the reason I'm talking about these is to show you the possibilities and help you get more creative. And talking about the color stories of Oceano palette, the primary shade of this palette is blue. So I see a lot of shades that are a shift of blue and other shades, including these two. And then the secondary one is green. So we have these two greens that are very mixed with yellow, and then these greens that are more of a tealy, so they're blue mixed. And then we have the two odd shades that are corally. Did anybody other than me think of Nemo when they saw the coral? And of course, coral reefs. So obviously for monotone, you could use the variations of blues or the variations of greens, these four green shades. You could arguably use the oranges together or just do a one shade on your eyes with the oranges. But then the palette gives more opportunities for analogous shades because you can use all kinds of blues with all kinds of greens, including the greens that have yellow in them. And then as far as complements are concerned, the one huge complement that pops out of this palette is the orange and the blues. Another complement that is a little bit more difficult to find is this shade Urchin has a purple shift, and it kind of is very blue purple, and that can be contrasted with this shade, which is kind of a green but could also be argued to be a deep yellow. If you found any other color scheme that I did not mention, don't forget to share it with the rest of us below. As always, these swatches are on bare skin with no primer. My first eye look is going to be with the Paleo palette, and I'm going to do one eye look with this, one eye look with Archeo, and one eye look with Oceano. And if you all want me to do more, you can write and request that in the comments below. I've already primed my eye with the eyeshadow primer from Glam Shop. With brush E04 from Singe, I'm going to go into Moraine. You all know how much I love very, very deep shades. Shades that look like they're just black with a dab of a different color. So this shade is totally capturing my heart. I'm blending the edges. I'm now using E05 from Singe, going into Arctic Waters and using this shade in my crease. And then with the same brush, I'm gonna bring the shade under my lower lash line. So far, pigmentation has been fantastic. You all know I don't even like using shimmers on a brush, but this has just been so smooth. I have not felt like my brush ate the shimmer, which is a main concern of mine. One thing I would love to do one day, but maybe not today, is to use this matte across the lid, but I want to use this shimmer today because it is so beautiful. It has a green to magenta shift, and I really want to see how it's going to look like with this look. So let's put some BH. Now obviously I'm limiting myself to one palette per look. Otherwise I could probably dab into other palettes for other shades. So let's go into Archeo. As I said, this is the shade. So beautiful. This is definitely a multichrome. And it's going over here, fixing this edge. Love it. And now with a Morphe brush, I'm gonna go into Epoch. You'll know where I'm going, in the inner corner. So beauties, I can already tell you that my issue with this palette is that it does not have a light matte blue. It is a little bit difficult otherwise to blend this really deep shade out. The reason I blended it out with the shimmer is because there are no lighter blues or teals or anything in that kind of a color range. And mixing it with the orange, you all know what that would have done. What would that done? It would turn brown because they're complements. I could ideally mix it with this, but it wouldn't have gone with the look. I kind of feel like the palette has just way too many blues, and one of them could have been a lighter matte. If not even blue, maybe a lighter matte green. I don't know, something a little bit closer. Now, again, I understand they were working off of something they had developed years ago, so they couldn't just completely revamp it. But I love this look, and on the plus side, it forced me to go out of my comfort zone to put a shimmer in my crease, which is not something I normally do, so it helps me experiment, which I absolutely love. Also, this brown and that brown, I haven't used them, but just looking at them, are they going to be that different? Maybe that's not even a brown. That kind of looks like a plum. Also, beauties, remember, I have touch this palette for the first time right now. This is not necessarily a review, but more of a first impression. And I think the palette's payoff has been really nice in terms of pigmentation, blendability, just ease of use. The deep blue matte shade had some fall off that I need to clean, and I'm going to bring the camera closer to show you the looks from close up once I'm done with the second look, which is going to be with the Archeo palette. So let's get started with that one. For this one, I picked Eye Prep, Eye Prime, and I already primed my eye with it because I want to also sort of test how these shades work on different eye primers. So let's go into this beautiful yellow matte. Let me use E01, and I'm going to use a little bit of this red erosion, reddish orange in my outer V area. And I'm gonna bring it under my lash line. Now with a slanted brush, I'm gonna go into Sundial. I'm gonna use it to line my lower lash line. Other than just a lot of kick up, I've not had any issue, but beauties, most brands I've had more or less the same amount of kick up. I think it's just things that are super pigmented a lot of times have a lot of kick up. So this is supposed to be a summery look. I'm gonna use Specular for my glitter glue here. Putting it here. And going into this beautiful green terrain, I can't really tell if this is a multichrome. It's beautiful. And I'm putting it over here. So this beautiful green reminds me kind of Duke or Mural. It has a peachy shift that really blends well with the other shades. Of course, it's a lime green, so it has a lot of yellow in it, so it definitely goes with the yellow that I've used, and then it contrasts the brick red or brick orange. And then to top it off, I'm using this Divina brush in Sulfur and putting it in my inner corner. Now, one thing I would have done if I could use more than just this palette would be to deepen it out. I just love very deep looks. Because I have very dark features, they usually look nicer on me, but this is a very summery look and it's great for this time of the year. And here are the two looks from close up. Let's now start with our last palette, Oceano. I already primed my eyes with icing from Glam Shop in shade Buttercream. And for this one, I'm gonna use some refer brushes. I kind of feel like I have to do the orange and blue. Should I do the orange and blue? Yeah, let's do it. Getting started with Mini 15, going into, ooh, lots and lots and lots of pigment and also lots of fall off. Undertow. I'm putting this over here at the edge. I'm gonna do the same look on both eyes for this one, and I'm gonna do this eye off camera. With Mini 1 going into Lagoon. Oof, this one has a lot of kick up. Can you all see that kick up? It sort of fizzes everywhere, but the pigmentation is pretty nice. And I'm gonna just bring it across, sort of like that. I'm gonna put that dark shade over it in a minute, but I'm loving this shade. It's so nice. Just a little bit of dab with that deeper shade. I think you all should be able to see the fall off. These blues have a lot of fall off. Because I promised an orange, I have to use this. With Specular from Divina, I'm gonna go over here. First with number 28. Going into this one, and by the way, I did not mention this, but you should be able to see it in my reel on Instagram where I do a close-up of the palettes, that the embossings are so on point and they really go with the palette. I mean, with the name of the palette. For example, this one has a starfish embossed, a stingray embossed, some ocean movements and corals and so on embossed, which is so on point. And then Paleo had a dinosaur foot embossed and similar things, and then Archeo had a few artifacts embossed. It's so cute and totally on point. Now with this, I am coming here and just tapping this. And you all know, because we've talked about it before in this channel, that these neon shades are usually not very, I don't want to say they're not pigmented, but you really need to build them up, so that's what we're kind of doing. And that's part of the reason why I used a glue base, although this is a matte shade and I rarely use mattes with the glue base. And this shade, Beauties, has a lot of fall off, but I'm loving this. And now with this one, which is number 3, I'm going into Mauna Loa. And this one is literally gonna go above. This is like a super beautiful gold to pink with a beautiful coral shift, and then coming under. I'm liking that. I do have a spot here that sometimes does not accept eyeshadow. Do you all have that? There are definitely spots on my eyes where I just can't put eyeshadow, and a lot of times when that happens, I put a little bit more glue base over there, because you gotta do what you gotta do, and then put some more pigment over it like that. This shade has a lot of kick up. Beauties, can you see that? Just too much kick up. Another thing is that there is a white dot inside the shade. It almost feels like it hasn't been very well milled. There's actually more than one white dot inside the shade. I do want to use a little more pizzazz. So what I'm gonna do is to use number 23 in this one, Tidal. We're continuing with the blue, and this one looks like a gorgeous, gorgeous blue. And I'm gonna literally line my eye with this. Love this shade. And I'm gonna also kind of bring it here too. I'm trying to get around the fact that there's, for lack of a better word, a bald spot on my eye. Okay, I can't really say that this is my favorite orange to blue look, but it's okay. I definitely enjoyed the shimmers, but I kind of feel like Clionadh still needs to work on its mattes. The light matte, this one, the light blue matte, and the orange matte, they have a lot of kick up. Now the light blue matte was at least pretty pigmented. The orange one is also pigmented. It's just hard to stick to my eye, and you had to really build it up even after building it a lot. I don't feel like it's had enough payoff. And then there's stuff in it. It's not fully, very finely milled. I did the other look off camera, and the strategy I used for the matte neon orange was to actually use my fingers, just like how I do with shimmers. So I put the glitter glue on first, then I used my finger, as you can see, dipping it into the pan and just tapped it over the glitter glue. And I think that was a good strategy because it also removed all the little kick up that I had there. So I ended up using the kick up, and I'm liking this look. It's a little bit different from some of the looks I've done, but I'm very much enjoying it, and it's very fun. Orange and blue are actually one of my favorite combination of complementary colors. The question that comes up is, are these palettes worth the price? So the first two, Archeo and Paleo, that were reincarnations of older palettes, are $75. Of course, Clionadh is a Canadian brand, so the price might change with the exchange rate, and this one is $82. Again, price could change. Let's talk about the shimmers first, because that is something Clionadh has been doing for years and they're much better at doing. And frankly, the shimmers did not disappoint. They were as I expected from Clionadh, from all of the other experiences that I've had with Clionadh, and I've had a lot of their products, both circular pans as well as their multichrome palettes, as well as their multichrome singles. I have a lot of Clionadh videos, beauties. I'm gonna tag my Clionadh playlist if you're curious. So from the shimmer side, there was no disappointment. The bar was high because it's Clionadh and they met the bar. On the matte front, this is a comeback. Clionadh's not had mattes in a while, and I believe they did one matte shade last year for their birthday when they released a trio, and I did not purchase that trio. I was curious to see how they're going to do on the matte front, and they definitely met on the pigmentation front. However, the palette has a lot of kick up. If you're somebody who gets put off by that, keep that in mind. I have a lot of amazing quality singles that have a lot of kick up, so it doesn't necessarily bother me unless they have extreme level of kick up, which frankly I did feel a little bit with a couple of these shades. The embossing on this neon shade is almost gone because it had that much kick up. But the pigmentation, as you can see, and the blendability was pretty good and consistent. I didn't have too much blendability problem. This look took 10-ish minutes for me to do. It wasn't like I was sitting here blending for hours. So overall, I would say the three palettes met my expectations. I already mentioned that maybe some shades could have been added. I expected a little more greens, for example, in the Dinosaur Paleo palette, but again, it was a recreation of an older palette. They probably didn't have a lot of room for creativity. And overall, the same complaint that I always make for all of these palettes. I wish they had more lighter shades. This is the lightest shade in this palette, and if I cover it up, you can see that there are not a lot of light shades. And usually when I ask for that, I'm either thinking about shades that go in the crease if you're trying to blend a deeper shade out, or for the inner corner, and we did not have a lot of those kinds of shades in either of these palettes. Now, to answer the critical question of are these palettes worth the price, that is $75 to $82 for 12 pans, I do feel that that is pricey. Now, I purchased this because it's Clionadh and I really wanted to try these palettes from Clionadh. I regretted not purchasing the OG Paleo and Archeo palette for 3 years, so I absolutely wanted to pick this collection up. But even $75 for a 12 pan is expensive. Now, saying that it's a little expensive doesn't mean that these palettes might not really merit a higher price than the average 12 pan. They do have a lot of very special shades, some of which you saw, for example, the shade that I put across my inner corner. And each of these palettes has multiples of that kind of shade that are duochromy to multichromy, but still, I think they could have done other things to bring the price down. One of them would be to reduce the pan size, for example. These pans are their normal circular pans, which are, I believe, 26 millimeter. I personally can't imagine going through these pans. I never go through eyeshadow pans this size. If you enjoyed this video, as always, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you're not subscribed. You can also check out my Clionadh playlist for more Clionadh related content. I hope to see you around again and have an amazing day. Bye.